Here's a big thing about Georgia's spring. It's right around the corner. So in a couple of days, Ryan and I will have you completely covered. Probably Matthew as well. If Georgia can just get this one thing right, they're going to be well on the way. Okay, they're going to be well on the way of getting where they want to go for this. Presumably 3 national championships in 4 seasons. It's not a question that win 3 out of 4. I mean, they're the betting favorite right now, which is, I mean, that should be the case, but it is kind of hard to reconcile. These guys, are they really that good? I mean, yeah, they are. I mean, I think that for them in Ohio State, it's all right there. But I think if you're Georgia, you're going to have to nail down your situation with the quarterback to wide receiver. I mean, you're missing out on Marcus, Ladd, and Brock Bowers. That's a lot of firepower that is just straight up gone. It's gone. And like, how does that get replaced? Where are you going after the fact with that? And that's why I do think this spring is important for Carson and them to get that right. To get what is how do you feel comfortable? How long will it take you to Stanford tight end's not going to get there until the summer, but everybody else is going to be there. Miami transfer, the Vanderbilt transfer. There are guys that are coming in, but this is a team that's got plus 300 odds to win the national championship next year. Almost not quite double what everybody else has got. Ohio State's hanging out there at 480. But everybody else is not even double, doesn't even have half the odds Georgia does. So I think this is a major part. You can always say, got to get right on the offensive line. No question. You can always say, is your defensive front where it needs to be? But a lot of those guys are returning for Georgia. So that's not a new thing. They already had a lot of these guys. The offensive line is, returning 4 or 5 guys. That's a lot. You're losing Cedric Van Pran. That hurts. But they should be a strength of the team. The defensive line, I've talked about that. We're going to see. I think I'm more skeptical than that of that position than maybe some other spots, but they seem to perform a lot. So there's that. Trey Scott's done a very good job at Georgia in producing with those guys and getting guys to the league. But, when you're averaging 300 yards a game as an offense passing the ball, that's a lot of production. And you've had some heavy turnover there. And with the loss of Bowers and the loss of McConkey and the loss of explosion from Marcus, you're going to have to really look at where are you at. And you're returning 3 guys who I think have been very productive for Georgia. Ra, Dominic Lovett, and then, the guy who could be a breakout, which is Dylan Bell. Okay, so you got those 3 guys. Now, and again, you got the transfer guys who are coming in. I did not mention Arian Smith because Arian Smith's not been super consistent. If Arian Smith's consistent, you got a whole different ball game here. A whole different ball game with a lot of problems for people. But he's not been, and it's not me hating, it's just what it's been. It's not been consistent. But, total offense, Georgia, 496 yards. Passing offense, let me find it. Passing offense for the Dogs. Number 11 in the country, Georgia. Number 11 in the country, 305 yards. That's a lot. LSU, the highest ranked SEC team, they were chunking the ball all over the place. All over the place. And in terms of yards per attempt, Georgia's sitting in the top 10 on that as well at 9.35 yards an attempt. Yards per completion. Now, some of this gets really skewed because schools like Air Force, the option teams are going to have blowout numbers on that front. But in terms of yards per attempt, Georgia's relatively hanging in there too at 13.3, 13.03. So, 29 touchdown passing, they're all basically near the top or at the top of college football. But that's you don't have Ladd, you don't have Brock, you don't have Marcus. Those guys are gone. You had to replace George Pickens. You had to replace A.D. Mitchell. You had to replace Jermaine Burton. So this has happened over time. You're going to have guys you're going to have to replace. But I do think that this spring is an important moment um, for Georgia on that front. That's an important thing. The top two teams throwing it next year, they will be Big Ten teams now. But I wouldn't say the bulk, but a lot of top 10 teams were from the Pac-12 this past year. Now, those guys are gone now. They're kind of spread out a little bit more. But Oregon, Washington State, SC, Arizona, 5 of the top 8 schools in the country throwing it were Pac-12s. The only teams that are staying in their league in the top 10 now are LSU. I don't know what to call Washington State. LSU, TCU, Colorado State, and then Georgia at 11. So everybody else is moving leagues. Oregon, Washington. I don't know what Washington State is categorized as. Oregon, Washington State, Southern Cal, Oklahoma, Arizona. Those 6, they're moving leagues. I don't know if that will affect the way that they do things. I don't know. But, that usually doesn't go great. But I think, Carson Beck's coming in this thing, y'all, as a Heisman contender. I mean, I probably should be preparing myself to go to New York in December because he's probably going to be there. Probably. Not certainly. Probably. And, if that's the case, that means he's had a really good year. It took him about a month to get used to things. I'll tell you, that first game at Georgia, you could tell he was not quite himself. He was not the guy that I know, he's kind of been. He wasn't that at the beginning of the season, the first game or two. But boy, it was like, when they really needed it against South Carolina, and certainly when they needed it against Auburn, and then he was just like a different player after that. It took him a little time to get to the deep end. And now he's the betting favorite with Quinn Ewers over at Texas at plus 750 to win the Heisman. Now, I mean, some of these on here are just big name quarterbacks. I should say, some of these are just quarterbacks at big schools. Texas, Georgia, now Oregon, Ohio State. Nico's at Tennessee. Is that a big name school? And then Jalen Milroe at Alabama. So are those, this is kind of what we do. But, you got Dart and then Musmeyer at LSU. Another question could be, are we entering into, I don't think this is true, but are we entering into a golden era of quarterbacks in the SEC again? I mean, I don't think so. But there was a moment in time when you had McCarron, Murray, Manziel, all in the SEC and Mettenberger, okay, it was pretty good too. So you had a really good crop of quarterbacks, and then they just all left. They all left at the same time, and you had Blake Sims at Bama, and you had Hudson Mason at Georgia, and in 14 you had, like the Kelly kid who was at Ole Miss. So you had some transition and some change there, but I think it's critical this spring that those guys get on the same page. And, it didn't take Ra and Dominic Lovett a long time. Maybe it doesn't take as long as I'm thinking. But I think if you can get that done, man, you better look out. Because these guys could be really dangerous. They don't need a lot of, what's the word? They already got a lot of firepower. They already got a lot of firepower. You don't need they already got a lot of firepower, but you gotta load the weapon properly, and that's what this spring will be. Is everybody on the same page? You're starting out with Clemson. You say what you want about where they've been. They've got a really good defense, or they've had a really good defense. Their offense has kind of sidetracked. Well, guess what? Georgia's offense is going to be playing Clemson's defense, and that's not going to be. That will be a challenge. I know Kentucky scored 30. What was the score of that game anyway? There's been, I don't know why I typed Clemson right there, or Kentucky. Neither of those teams were good at passing the ball this past season. But that will be a challenge. You know, they're not just rolling out against a directional school. It's an important moment for Georgia to open up against them. Yeah, they allowed 35 to Kentucky, so they're not exactly shutting those guys down. And I think it's probably not a great sign for dealing with Georgia, but Clemson has been pretty stout. And then of course you roll right into it, man. I mean, you've got a road game with Kentucky and then a road game with Alabama. These are all in the first 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be challenging for Georgia right out of the gate. Are these guys going to be ready and get ready? We're going to see. I think if they do, man, you better look out.